Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Arjan Loogman. I'm from the Information Lab in the Netherlands, and I'll be your host for this webinar called Data Prep to the Edge of Impossible. I'll just give the last attendees the chance to dial in. So I'll wait 2 more minutes and then I will rejoin you. So stay tuned. Okay, I hope that the last attendees have by now joined this webinar. Again, good afternoon. My name is Arjan Loogman. I am from the Information Lab in the Netherlands, broadcasting to you from the lovely city of Amsterdam. Welcome to this webinar called Data Prep to the Edge of Impossible. Today, we're going to look at how to take an unstructured file and transforming that into a structured table that you could easily put into your data warehouse for further processing. So what we will be looking at today is a file like you see in the image. Oftentimes you are confronted with a set like this, and while this would to a human eye be very understandable and very structured, this is not really a format that you would put into your data warehouse, for instance. And I'll show you, I'll explain why, and I'll explain how to tackle this and use Alteryx, how to turn this into a more structured format. So what are we going to do? I'm going to show you what the desired data structure is, and after that, I'll just show you in Alteryx how it's done, and I'll give you a couple of tips and tricks along the way. If you want to ask any questions, you can do so through the chat box. I'll just be going through the webinar as it is, and I will give you the opportunity to ask your questions by the end. So please do so. This webinar will be recorded, so if you want to review it, you can always revisit this webinar on the Information Lab YouTube channel. Okay, so this is the file again, and it looks really structured to the human eye. There's the names of the dealers. We have subtotals, and we have a column with totals. And if you would read this as a human, this would all make sense. However, if you want to store this for further processing, this is not really a good format. We wouldn't need the subtitles. We wouldn't need all these empty rows, which make it readable to the human eye, but it's just bloat actually. So we'll have to do a few steps to get the data into the shape that we really like. I'll show you how this looks in Alteryx. We'll go to Alteryx. And in this particular workflow, I have already loaded the file that I showed you just before. And here it is. And if you look at the file and ask yourself if you would want to calculate the grand total, for instance, this is not really easily done with the data is in the shape as it is now. You would have to calculate across for each dealer, and then you would have to calculate a total down. And also ask yourself what would happen if we would have a new dealer. Then you would have to readjust your formula and go back to this file and recalculate everything again, which is not really handy. And also, if you look at the file as it is now, you see multiple columns pertaining to the same variable, which is commission. Actually, it is a good practice to put everything that belongs to one particular variable into just one column. So basically what you would want to do is to stack everything that is in here into just one column. Furthermore, there's information on your dealers, which is actually not in a column, but in the column headers, and we would want to use them as well. So we're going to have to do something about that. And also, if you look at the dates here, a human would understand that this month is February, but a computer does not. So we really have to change this so that for every month we have here in our report, the information is there. And if we look further, you can see here that these are 3 rows that really don't include any valuable information for us as it is now. Also, if we look at how the information is on the end, we have a couple of empty columns that we want to get rid of. And also, if we look all the way down, there is a couple of rows that we don't need here. We want to get rid of all these. And also we want to get rid of all these subtotals and these empty rows here. So we really have some cleaning up to do. And I will show you how. This is the complete workflow. This is what we are going to build towards. And just close this quickly. And what the desired output is actually more like this. So you have one column for your periods, one column for your dates, neatly formatted. You have one column with all the information about your dealers. We have a separate column for the dealer code, which was in one cell earlier. And then we have just one column for the value of the commission. So this is what we're going to build, and I'll briefly introduce you to the tools that we are going to use. Here they are. We're going to use the sample tool, which is basically a very handy tool if you want to just select a couple of rows of your data set, be that the first couple of rows or the last couple of rows, so you want to skip, or you just want to make a sample of your data. This is the tool to go. If you want to choose to include or exclude or reorder any columns that you have in your data set, you want to rename them or you want to change their data type, the select tool is the tool that we're going to use, and you'll see that this tool will show up a couple of times in our workflow. If you want to filter out any data that you have, so if you want to filter and just keep a small amount of rows based on a rule that you have based on an expression, you'll use the filter tool. What we'll also use is the dynamic rename tool. We saw that the possible names of the columns that we want to use are in the data set, but they are not the column names yet. So we'll just shave off the top couple of rows and then use the data we have there to rename the columns with the information that's in those couple of rows. The dynamic rename tool can also be used to give your columns a name based on a formula, or maybe you want to dynamically add a prefix or a suffix to all of your column names, which can all be done with the dynamic rename tool. We saw our date field, which was not really in a very proper date format. So we'll have to do something about that. And that is the date time tool that we're going to use. It can just take any string format and you can tell what kind of string format to look for and change that into a standardized date format. Now, we saw that we did have some information on the dates, but there was also a lot of information of the dates that was missing. With a regular formula tool, you wouldn't be able to change that. But with a multi-row formula, we will be able to tackle this problem, because the multi-row formula tool is a tool that can reference data in cells above or below. And you will see that we'll be using this in a very nice, neat way to tackle this particular problem. Furthermore, what we're going to do is we're going to stack all the information about commission of all our dealers into one column. And we'll use the transpose tool for this, because we are going to pivot all the columns from the commission into one vertical column. And there we will get actually two new columns with the names of our dealers and also the value for our commissions. What we saw is that in the column headers, there was the name of our dealers. And in the same cell also was were their initials. And we would want to split them. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the text to columns tool to split that cell based on a delimiter. So we can just have two separate columns, one with name and one with dealer code. And there will be some dirty data that we will have to clean up. And for that, we will be using the data cleansing tool. That's a really nice tool if you want to quickly clean up your data, be it having extra spaces or line breaks or null values. You can really easily clean that up. Okay, so I'll go back to the starting workflow here. And that's our data set right there. So we'll start with just shaving off these 3 first rows of data, which we won't need. So for this, we're going to take the sample tool, and I'll just drag it onto the canvas. And what you will see in the configuration panel on the left is that you can choose a couple of ways how to process your data. You can choose to sample just the first couple of rows or the last couple of rows, but it also offers the opportunity to just skip a couple of rows. And this is the option that we will choose. Now, for the value of n, we have to enter a number. And in our case, it's going to be 3 because we just want to skip the first 3 rows of data. And now if I run my workflow, you will see that we have now shaved off the first 3 rows of data. So that's really nice. And now in our next step, we will go and get rid of those couple of columns here right at the end, columns F21 through F27. And we will be using the select tool for that. And the select tool is in your favorites or in the preparation category, if you would be looking for it. I'll just drag it onto the canvas, and what we can do here in the configuration panel is scroll all the way down, and you can already see the fields that we don't need. How convenient. They have a different data type, so it's easily recognizable. I'll just uncheck field F21 through F27. And if I run my workflow now and I look at my output, I will see that those columns have now gone. So we're good to go for the next step. Now, as you can see in the results window, the information that we would need for the column names is still in a row of data, and we actually want to promote these to become the actual column headers. Now, of course, you could choose to use the select tool and go and rename all the columns in here, but that's just not really a maintainable solution. So what we will do is we'll use the dynamic rename tool. And the dynamic rename tool is in the developer section of your toolbar. So if you have set up your toolbar in the all option, if you click on the plus on the very right of your toolbar, you can set your toolbar to either show just a small set of tools or everything. Maybe some of you have your Alteryx set up to getting started. If you want to see everything, just click all in the drop-down menu and press OK. And then you can find the dynamic rename tool in the developer section. And yes, there it is. But you can also just type in DIN in your search bar on the top right. And if you see the dynamic rename tool mentioned over there, you can just click on it and drag it onto your canvas. So that's a really nice, fast way to get to this particular tool. Now, if you look at the configuration panel, you'll see that by default, it has been set to change the name of the columns by formula, which is not the option that we are going to use, because we are going to use that top row of data, which we saw here, to actually give the columns our name. And we'll use the drop-down menu in the configuration panel at the top. And we'll click it and we'll see the option here in the middle, take field names from the first row of data. We'll choose that one, and there's actually nothing else that we have to configure. So we'll just run our workflow again, and then you'll see that now all the columns have their proper column names. If we look a bit further, we see the total column, and the total column is not really a column that we will need because we won't need to save that into a data warehouse. We're just going to store the raw data, and we will have any further processing tools or reporting tools calculate the totals at runtime. So we can get rid of that one. For this, we will simply use another select tool. And we'll drag it on. And the only thing we need to do is just unclick the total column in the configuration panel to get rid of the total column, and that's it. Okay, so now we have our data set without the total column. And now we will have a look at our data and look at what we saw before. The subtitle row, that's also not data that we will store in our data warehouse. And the rows that have been used, the empty ones, to make it better discernible for the human eye to see the difference between the first period and the second period, we will get rid of that as well. And for this, we are going to filter those rows out. Now, if you look closely to the data, there is this one common situation going on with both the subtotal rows and the empty rows, and that is that in the period column, those cells have null values. And if we scroll down, we'll see that that's a repetitive pattern. And also, if we are going to look at the empty rows here, all the way at the bottom, you can see that in the period column, they are null. So we can write an expression that we can use to filter those rows out. And we'll just tell the filter to look at any row where the period column has a value of null. So we're going to drag in our filter tool here. And the only thing that we have to use at this point is the basic filter. We won't have to write any fancy custom filter for now. In the filter tool, we will have to select the column that we are going to use, which is the period column. And in the middle, you now see an operator that we can use for our expression. And in this case, we're not looking for something like an equals expression. We're just going to look for any value in that period column that is not null. So all the rows that have a null value will be left out. And that's it for this expression. If I now run the workflow, you'll see that in the true output, there are no empty rows anymore. The subtotals have gone, and they have all gone out through the false output of the filter tool. So we're not going to have to deal with them anymore. And now we have a more condensed data set. And if we look at our dates over here, you will see that we have kind of a discrepancy going on. We have short versions of a date, we have dashes in there, and we also have full written dates. However, they are not yet in the real Alteryx date format. If we click on the metadata button here at the top right of our results window, we can see that if we look at our date column here, that the data type of this column is still a string and not a date type. So we'll have to convert this column into something more usable. And for that, we're going to use the datetime tool. The datetime tool is located in the parse category. If in case you were looking for it, it's not in your favorites. Just go over to the parse category and drag it in. So the datetime tool, you'll have to tell the datetime tool what it should be looking for in terms of what is the format it has to expect in terms of text. We will tell it to look for string and transform it into a datetime format. And then we will have to tell the tool, okay, which column do you have to look in? And it's not the period column, and we will select the date column for that. I will leave the output name as it is, and you can look through the possible formats that are pre-entered that you could select. However, the one that we are looking for is not in this list. You can see that there is an option with a month and year, but a year in 4 letters. And there is also an option where you can type in mon dot, which means that the abbreviation of the months, which is actually what we're going to use. But as you look through this, you will see that there's no standard format that matches the format that we have to deal with in our date column. So we will choose the custom option at the bottom, and we will type in the format that the tool has to look for, which is the month in an abbreviation. So we type mon and a dot, and then a space, and then the year is actually in 2 digits. So we will use the YY format. And after this, we run the workflow. You'll get a couple of messages here, which is logical, because if we look at our input again, you'll see that, of course, this fits the format that we've entered, and of course, this does not. So what will happen is that these dates will disappear. However, if we look through our data, we will be able to see that each row represents just 1 month. So we could devise a rule after this, after these operations we're doing in the conversion stage, to actually fill the rest of the missing dates. So this is not really a problem at this point. Now, if we look at the output, the original date column still stays the same. However, at the very end of our data set, we do have a column called DateTimeOut with all the dates from the first couple of rows. And if you will look at the metadata, you will also see that the DateTimeOut column is in a proper date format. So that's okay. Now what we'll have to do is actually to get rid of our original date column, which we don't need anymore. And we'll have to reorder so that the new date column will get back up in its original place. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the select tool to do all this. And if we want to unselect our original date column, we'll just unclick it over here. And if we want to rename our new datetime column, you pick the rename column in the configuration panel, click it, and give the column another name. Now, if you want to reorder the columns, you could select the DateTimeOut column in the configuration panel and press the up arrow to have it go up. Otherwise, if you want a faster solution, just click on the DateTimeOut column with your right mouse button and drag it all the way up so you can have it on its original place again. And that's it. So if you run it now, we'll see that our new date column is now properly in its position in a date format. And we can proceed now with filling in the missing dates. As you can see, the formula, the datetime tool has changed the dashes into null values, which is actually a good thing at the moment, because now we are able to devise a rule for really easily changing or adding the missing dates. For this, we will have to use our previously mentioned MultiRow formula, because basically what we are going to do is to tell Alteryx if there is a value for the date column that is null, just look up one row, take that date, add 1 month to that date, and simply enter it into this into the original row. And this would work for this particular cell in between. However, this would also work for all the missing dates in the end, because they will simply look to the row above, take that date, add a month, fill it in here, and then this one is filled again. So if this row looks up one row, then it will be able to reference that row again. So that's the expression that we are going to create for this one. The MultiRow Formula tool is in the preparation category. You can find it somewhere in the middle. And now, if you want to configure the MultiRow tool, you first have to choose between whether you are going to create a new field or are you going to update an existing field. And we will choose the latter because we're just updating our newly created date field. And we will, of course, select it. And then we have to think. So basically what we're going to say is if the current row we're looking in is null, take the date from the row above and add 1 month to it. So we're going to need an if statement for that, because if one row is null, then do this. If not, just leave it. So I'll already type in my if then statement, and in Alteryx you always have to enter the else statement and the end if, otherwise your formula won't work. Now, if we look at our function, we have a way to test if our cell is null. So if you go to the functions tab in the configuration panel of your MultiRow tool, you can press the tab called functions, which carries a lot of expressions. And then there's the test category all the way down. And there you'll find the is null option. Just double click it and it will appear in the formula wherever you've left your cursor. Now, in the variables tab, we'll be able to pick our date field, and we're actually going to reference the actual row, so no row above or no row below. We'll just reference our original date field. So now we have if our original date field is null, what should we do? So now we're thinking of referencing the row above and adding a 1 month to the date. What we'll choose first is the datetime add function, because the datetime add function already asks you, okay, which column and which row should I add to? So I'll select this first. And then the datetime add function asks me, okay, which field should I process? How many days or months or years should I add to the date that I'm referencing, and in which units should I do this? So you can type days or months or years. Now for the field that we're choosing, we're going to go back to variables, and we're actually going to look up one row, and we'll select the date column one row above. Now we only need to add 1 month, so we'll just type in 1. And for the units that we want to add, we'll choose month. And if our date field is not null, we will just leave the date as it is. So we'll just reference back the original date field. And that's it for this formula. So if it is null, take the row above and add 1 month, else take the original date. So if I now run my workflow, you will see now that in the date column, every single row has neatly been populated with a date in steps of 1 month. So that has been taken care of. Now, we will have to look at a solution for all the separate columns of commission values, which we want to have in just one column. We will pivot our data and we're going to stack all these columns on top of each other. And for that, we're going to use the Transpose tool, which will take all the horizontal information and take it to a vertical axis. And what will happen is that for each row here, the period 1 and the date value will stay and they will duplicate down. And for each of these values, for Daniel Pate, Caitlin Roberts, and Max Torres, etc., we will have a new row with the same information for period and date, but with the new value for the commission. What we will choose is, in the configuration panel, we'll choose period and date as the key columns, because those are the ones that will be replicated down, and we don't need to pivot them because they are already in order. And if you scroll down, you will see that these are the columns. So all the columns with the names of our dealers, those are the ones that we will be pivoting vertically, and we'll keep the dynamic or unknown columns options checked, because at some point we might have a new dealer in our list, and we will still want that dealer to be pivoted as well. Now, if I run this, you will now see that we have, instead of having all the columns per dealer, we now have a set with a column called name, which contains all the names of all our dealers. And we have a column with our values, just one column. And now you can see that the information here for the first month of 2015 has been duplicated all over for each and every name of our dealer. And you will also see that for each new period, here's Caitlin Roberts, that's the first, Daniel Tate, here we go. And if we go down for period 2, then we will see that Daniel Pate is there again. So you see a lot of duplication going on, and this might not be very readable for a human, but this is exactly the format that you would use for your data warehouse, or if you would want to visualize this in a reporting tool, because now you can really sum and slice and even rank your data very easily. Okay. Now, if we look at our name column, we still see that the name of our dealers and their separate dealer code are in one cell, and that's actually not a situation that we want. We want them to be in 2 separate columns this time. So we need to split this particular column up in 2. And what we are going to use is we're going to use that nice little dash in the middle to split on. And for this, we're going to use the text to columns tool. It's in your favorites, or you can look it up in the parse section of your toolbar. We'll drag this in, and now we will select the column that we would like to split, which is the name column. I'll just show you here. Yeah, the name column. And instead of the comma, we will choose to split on the dash. And we are very sure that we just want 2 columns, because basically it's a name and it's a dealer code. So we will select not 3, but 2 columns. And if we run this, we see that we now have 2 columns named name 1 and name 2. These are the columns that we want to work with. And now we can drop the original name column because we won't be using that anymore. If we look at the 2 new columns, we see we have a red indicator which means there's something not okay. And the first column says, hey, I have some spaces at the end, which probably is not good. And if we look at the other column, it says, okay, I have a leading space. Now, some people might be inclined to then go back to the split to columns tool and just type in those spaces to get rid of them as well. But if you run it like this, then you'll see that basically what the tool has now done is split the columns on the spaces instead of on the dashes. So we will get rid of those extra spaces in another step. So I'll get back to my configuration panel and take out the spaces and just retype the dash. And there we are. Now we have my 2 columns back. So what we will do now is we're going to rename those 2 columns. We're going to take out the original one, and we're also going to change the data type of this one. For that, we will choose our select tool. There we go. So the original date field, we don't need anymore. So we'll just uncheck it. Now the 2 new name fields, the first one actually contained the name of our dealer. So we will rename that to name. And the other one contained our dealer code. So we will just name this dealer code. And since we want our value to be at the end, we'll just move our value column. And you can see here that the value column is in a string format. So if we want to do any calculations with the commission value, this is not going to work with the string data type. So we will just change this to a double. And there we are. Oh. I did that wrong. So here we are, we have a period column, we have a date column, and we have 2 columns, name and dealer code, and we have our value column, which has a numeric data type. The last thing we are about to do is to clean up our name and dealer code columns. And for this, we are going to use the data cleansing tool. And if you look at the configuration panel, we will just select the name and dealer code fields, which are the ones we want to clean up. We don't really need to replace any nulls, so we will uncheck those, and we actually keep only the option to remove leading and trailing white spaces. And if we run our workflow a final time, you will see that we now have a data set that looks identical to the format that I showed you in at the beginning of this webinar. So what you've seen just now is how to take out a couple of rows or make a selection of rows. I've showed you how to include or exclude and rename, reorder, and change the data type of columns. I've shown you how to rename your column names dynamically. I've shown you how to filter out unwanted rows. I've shown you how to convert strings into a date time format. I've shown you a way to reference rows above and use those in a formula to fill in missing values. I've shown you how to pivot your data from a horizontal orientation into a vertical axis. And I've also showed you how to split columns using a delimiter. And I've shown you how to clean up some messy values in your data. And if you have your data set like this, you might be able to pull off a dashboard like this, for instance. This dashboard is based on the data set you've just shown. And it's if you have a data set like this, it's really easy to build a dashboard like this. So there you go. So this concludes the demo part of this webinar. If you have any questions, please feel free to do so. You can ask your questions in the chat box. And while you'll will be typing your questions, I will show you a couple of links where you can go if you would like to learn a bit more about the tools in Alteryx or how you want to get better, because there's a lot of nice information out there. For instance, if you want to just look up the dry manual of each tool there is, you can, of course, go to the Alteryx Designer help page. A really good source of information is the Alteryx community. And if you go to the Alteryx Academy, there you can watch, you can use the interactive videos, you can watch the webinar-like videos, and also a great source of becoming better at using Alteryx is the weekly challenges. My personal favorite. The weekly challenges come in all sorts of levels, be it beginner or moderate or advanced, and they cover all sorts of problems, be it just cleaning up your data or doing advanced analysis or doing spatial type analysis. It's really your place to go if you want to train yourself and get better. There's also the Data School blog, the place where everyone who has been at the Data School has written their blogs, and there's a host of all cool tips and tricks on how to tackle a particular problem or how to use a particular tool. So be sure to read that. We also do other webinars. If you would like to see which webinars are up there, please go to meetup.com/letstalkdata and see if there are any further webinars that you would like to join. Okay, I see that there are no further questions. I'm not really sure if yes, Angela, the video will be shared. This webinar is recorded, and we will share this on our Information Lab YouTube channel. Give it 1 or 2 days for us to just edit the video and post it up on the YouTube channel. So yes, you can view this. I will share the link to the YouTube channel with you guys in a couple of minutes. And I see that I made a slight mistake with posting the links that I was talking about a couple of minutes ago, so I've reposted them to you. I hope you can see them now. Anytime. It was my pleasure. Yes, you too. So I'll just wait just 1 more minute to see if there's anyone with any more questions. And if that's not the case, then I'll sign off. Okay, if there are no more questions, then I will end this webinar by wishing you a very good afternoon. And if you've dialed in from anywhere else on the planet, maybe a good morning or a good evening. Have a nice day all.